Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions. We're a cybersecurity podcast that is all about access.
Access granted.
Access to people and ideas that can impact your career and help you secure your organization. Hi, my name is Bruce Sussman. I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld and your podcast host. And in today's session, we are speaking to Neal O'Farrell, the founder of the SyberResilience Project.
Is my burnout impacting my personal relationships?
Which is a new effort to develop a baseline on mental health and stress.
Is it impacting my family? Is it forcing me to think about another career?
Among cybersecurity professionals.
So it's what went in as simply as data to prove an assumption has become really almost a growing network of people shouting, venting, and screaming, hell yeah, this has been a long time coming, and we will do much better and be much better if you keep talking about it.
And you have a chance to keep the conversation going and help direct it. Today's interview is really something everyone in security should hear. Also today, a new publication from Trend Micro for your end users and for your team on signs of infection among the technology used by remote workers. Thanks to Trend Micro for being our premier podcast partner. A single match in the darkness generates a surprising amount of illumination. If you've experienced that in a dark room or maybe while camping during the summer, you know exactly what I mean. And sometimes that first match strike is just the start. Now a new project in cybersecurity wants to build a roaring fire. A fire to light the way for security professionals and organizations to help protect security leaders and teams from burnout. The founder of this movement is hearing alarm bells. He says burnout is hitting cybersecurity professionals faster and among those who are younger than ever before. And he says you have a chance to be part of the solution here. Let's go to my interview now with Neal O'Farrell, the founder of the SyberResilience Project. And in this case, cyber is spelled P-S-Y-B-E-R. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Great to speak to you.
Yeah, it's excellent to have you here. And I thought a good place to start might be on your background so we can get to know a little bit about your perspective on the industry. And I know you have something like 4 decades in cybersecurity / privacy experience. And our audience is always interested. How did you get started? And give us some bullet points on where your career took you.
Yeah, sure. So like everyone else in security, I came from a fashion background, right? So yeah, at 1980, I went to study marketing in Dublin, Ireland, to be the third generation to take over a famous Irish fashion business. So I was to be a dressmaker, not a code maker. So
you weren't kidding. You really did come from a fashion background. That's a first for me. Yeah,
absolutely. And my head is still there. So first year in college, some guy in a basement of this rickety old building that was our college, we had our first batch of computers. I think they might have been Macs, but he showed me how you could put a floppy drive in, a floppy disk into the drive. And by doing that, and I didn't know fully how he did it, you could steal the professor's passwords. And I thought, that's wicked and wicked good. And my immediate reaction was not, how could I learn to be a hacker? Because the word I don't think existed back then. At least we weren't too familiar with it. But if these computer thingies ever take off, the world is going to need to protect against people like that. So that's kind of when I first got into it. And the fashion business never happened. You Americans, for some crazy reason, thought that polyester and nylon were far more practical than finely woven gossamer tweed. But anyway, that's another thing I carry with me.
We've never recovered from that mistake, by the way, but go ahead. I
know. It's blame the Kardashians at this point, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was 1980, 1982. I decided I would do a 2-year certificate instead of 4-year degree. I had lost all hope by then. Some buddies asked me if I would help protect. They were an accounting software startup, and they wanted to stop piracy. So they asked me if I could figure out some way of doing it. So I stumbled across a thing called a dongle. Remember dongles?
I do, yes,
And
indeed.
Dongles, the dongles that I found at least, were based on encryption. They had the DES encryption algorithm in them. And that's my introduction to encryption. And then over the next 10 years in Ireland, I became the encryption guy, which was thoroughly frightening because I was still a dressmaker. I could not explain how encryption worked. Even though I met the co-author a couple of years later, Carl Meyer from IBM, who co-authored DES, and met with Diffie. He came over to Ireland to see some of the stuff we're doing on public key. But I suffered from two things very early on that a lot of people in security deal with now: imposter syndrome and stress. Imposters, and they're connected. I felt like I didn't belong here. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in way over my head, and stressed because all my clients were the most important you could find. They were governments. They was the Defense Department. It was major banks, and it was encryption. So if I messed up, I was in real trouble. So I learned very early on what stress really felt like, and I came into it with a lot of Irish with mental health issues anyway, but recognized or suspected but not diagnosed, and because they weren't diagnosed and because of the stigma, left untreated. So 20 years ago, I moved to the US. So I stayed in that business. It was tough. We went up against the NSA and got into a lot of trouble with them a little bit before Phil Zimmerman, PGP, got into trouble with unbreakable encryption.
Right.
And when I moved to the States, I got a job as director of education for a security startup in San Francisco called Zone Alarm, which is now Checkpoint. And so that brought me into the softer side of security, which is people. And I've kind of been there ever since, between security, privacy, and more recently, ethics.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic, and that is an incredible journey. And yeah, I've heard when you mentioned the imposter syndrome, it instantly took me back to a fireside chat that I saw. I think it was SecureWorld Denver, where the leaders were talking about that and how you don't have to know it all, and you just push through, and you will acquire that knowledge or surround yourself with those who don't. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is still an issue in security, as I know you know, but I've heard that recently. So, all right, that's great. Thank you for your background. Now let's go to one of the questions that I had about stress. I've heard you describe cybersecurity as a high stress and quick burnout industry. What are you seeing as evidence of that?
Well, we started talking about it nearly a decade ago, which meant that it must have been at pretty chronic levels for quite a while for us to really actually talk about it in the open. I mean, even this morning I was looking at a Jack Daniels speaking at a B-Sides interview in 2012, talking how bad it was. So we know anecdotally that it's there. And Jack and Josh Gorman, they've done a lot of work on this. It's been talked about at DEF CON and Black Hat in the last couple of years at RSA. So we know anecdotally that it's there. What we've noticed in the last couple of years is, first, how bad it's getting, and the rate of acceleration. Whereas, I hate to say it in my day, but in days of security you didn't get burned out until towards the end of a long career. Now I'm seeing people talking about burnout after 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
So it's the degree of it that it's getting a lot worse, not getting better, and it's hitting people faster and younger. So that means there must be something happening in the industry that's making it worse. And it means we could lose some of our most promising early on people talking about quitting and going on to more pleasant careers.
Right. And as we know, we can't afford to lose anybody. We need more people, right? So
sure. And some of the people dealing with the most chronic burnout are the most experienced professionals. We do not want to lose those of all of them.
Yeah, great point. Okay, excellent. Now, on your website, the SyberResilience Project website, I noticed that you have a list of top reasons security professionals are getting stressed out and burned out. Will you share and unpack, say, the top 5 of these? What are the biggest offenders, do you think?
Well, so I went into this thinking the top two responses are going to be understaffing and under budgeting. And I really was quite surprised that although they are high up there, they're not as obvious as I thought. One thing that's come on very strong is unrealistic expectations. This I hear repeatedly, that they think we know all this stuff. They think that we're capable of working 12, 14, 16-hour days. They think that we're constant, that we know about the new threats before anyone else. We have unpacked and understand all these vendor tools. So, and that we win all the time. There's no kind of theory of acceptable losses in security yet, that you win what you can and you ignore what's not really going to hurt you. So unrealistic expectations, certainly up there in the top five. One that's beginning to emerge and that I didn't think about was constantly revolving CISOs. And we know from other studies that CISOs have a very short lifespan. It could be 18 to 24 months. Security pros tend to have longer lifespans. So managing the different management styles, the different skill levels, the different personalities, really having to start dating all over again every time a new CISO comes into the picture. We have the usual offenders of long hours, of not being able to check out, of constantly being on the job, of constantly worrying about being fired. Although that's happening less and less, I think, until COVID with the skill shortages. But we've identified close to 24 that have been mentioned repeatedly as causes of stressors, and it came down to the staffing, and Josh Coleman brought it up a while ago in a conversation, the idea of toxic personalities in security. So it's not just about the lack of security professionals, but it's the type of security professionals that we have. A lot of them are rock star personalities. A lot of them have dysfunctional social skills. A lot of them are narcissistic. And that's creating tensions within security teams that is creating stress and accelerating burnout.
Yeah, I could see that. And certainly, as we all know, because I'm sure everybody listening has worked with somebody with a toxic personality, that just infects the whole environment. And it adds so much stress.
Sure. And security attracts those kind of people. People who like to be know-it-alls, people who are not comfortable working in large teams, people who like to be condescending, who are not good mentors, who are not teachers, good communicators, who love to be smarter than the other person. And you don't want to get rid of them because you can't afford it. You can't wash out the toxicity because you need every hand on deck, or you simply don't want to recognize that person is as big as a problem as you suspect.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of, when I hear you describe those things, it almost sounds like, the old version of security, right? The Department of No. That's the kind of
right.
Yeah, personality you're describing. And thankfully, I think we're trying to transition away from that. That is great. Okay. So thank you for that list. Now we've got these issues, we've got these challenges, these problems, and you're trying to do something about this with the SecureWorld Project. First of all, would you spell that for us, because our audience can't see it here on the podcast, and then tell us, what exactly is it?
Yes, let me draw you a picture. It's cyber, spelled PSY. And I didn't come up with that, I have to say. It's been used, the term cyber for psychology and security has been around for a few years. Ryan Louie presented on cyber PSY security at RSA for the last couple of years. He's a psychologist from Stanford who's studying another aspect of cybersecurity, which is the growing concern that our adversaries are recognizing the vulnerability that stress and burnout create in the defenders, and they're exploiting that. A related but slightly different topic. So the idea of the PsyberResilience Project was first of all to measure. You asked that question at the start, what's the evidence? So we really want to get good hard data that this really is prevalent, that it really is, as we assume, growing, and that it's having an impact, and what kind of impact. Use that data to persuade security leaders to take it seriously and realize that mental health is not a weakness, it's actually a strength. And also recognize that if you're addressing stress and burnout in your security team, it's a smart security strategy, because if your security team are stressed, we know stress impacts attention, decision-making, focus, memory. We know that it increases cynicism, it increases apathy, disengagement. They all create security risks. So if you're not the touchy-feely kind of security leader, and a lot of security still are not, we still have a lot of that middle-aged white dude complex in security, do it because it's great for your bottom line and it's free. So we wanted to get that data to actually prove to security leaders that it is a bigger problem as we're suspecting, and there are ways to address it that have no impact on your budget. You're not have to kind of allocate for it. But as we started to ask the questions, and we've had a few hundred responses so far, a lot of the responses, I'm glad you just asked, because no one else is. And by asking the questions, you're doing two things. You're reminding me that someone's listening and someone's bringing this up, and you're forcing me to ask out loud questions that I've never asked myself. Is my burnout impacting my personal relationships? Is it impacting my family? Is it forcing me to think about another career? So it's what went in as simply as data to prove an assumption has become really almost a growing network of people shouting, venting, and screaming, hell yeah, this has been a long time coming, and we will do much better and be much better if you keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is. And we will keep talking about it, including specifics on how you and your peers can get involved in the Cyber Resilience Project. That is after this. We've talked a lot today about burnout, including some of the signs to watch for. And Trend Micro offers new insights now for remote workers and your team on signs that could indicate devices are infected. Here's what we learned in today's Trend Micro Top 3. Number 1, if you notice slower performance on your devices or your end users complain about that, it could mean an infection has taken place. Secondly, check your sent items periodically to see if unknown emails are being sent out from your account. Sometimes attackers secretly set up email rules to accomplish this. And number 3, Trend Micro is seeing many non-PC based devices being targeted in homes, things like routers, and then used in attacks that are out of homes, potentially against organizations. Now, I've linked to this timely report called Know the Symptoms, Protect Your Devices While Working From Home. It's a great resource to share with your end users. And thanks again to Trend Micro, our premier podcast partner. Now, let's continue with a discussion. Neal O'Farrell is the founder of a new mental health initiative for cybersecurity professionals. He calls it the CyberResilience Project, and he's listening to what you have to say about your stress and your burnout.
And the greatest advantage of listening, it allows the person struggling to scream, to say, this is why I'm behaving the way I am. When you see me in a SOC, for example, and I'm disengaged or I'm angry or I'm cynical or disillusioned, that's not my personality. That's what the job is doing to me. And the more you know about that, the better I feel about it, because you're not judging my personality, you're judging my reaction to the job.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, and I had not thought of that, but I see exactly what you're saying. And you touched on this for a moment, but you really believe that an organization's security posture is damaged potentially if you've got a burnout security team. Can you unpack that just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have some good data to back it up. We have some recent studies from Ponemon, from Symantec, that found close to 2/3 of security professionals have said that stress and burnout have made them think twice about that particular job and this particular industry. So we know that people are thinking about leaving at a time when we can't afford to have them leave. We know that it's not good for hiring or retention. If you have a particularly toxic or mentally unhealthy workplace and word gets round, you have bad security leaders that don't address it, people will work for a competitor instead of you. There's still no shortage of jobs in security. So it becomes a hiring barrier. That impacts your security posture. If you're losing people, that's another problem. It's not just finding more people, but it's bringing them up to speed, getting them familiar and comfortable with your environment, your policies, your procedures, your teams. But also we know, as I mentioned earlier, the tangible impact of stress and burnout, and particularly at a chronic level, impact the way you think. So if you're stressed, you're not thinking clearly, you're not engaged, your memory, your clarity of thought, your decision making, your commitment to the mission and the job, you're kind of checking out mentally. That creates vulnerabilities, that leads to mistakes, and that creates security risks that could be far more costly than simply addressing it.
Yeah, wow. That's a very stark reality. So thank you for painting that picture. That's excellent. I think this will be really informative for a lot of security teams and professionals. So that helps. Now, I'm curious about your personal transition. I mean, I'm looking at kind of following the bouncing ball here, and we go from the dressmaker, right, to, the code floppy disk guy, and next thing you know, the encryption in your cybersecurity career. And now you're focusing on mental health issues in those who are in security or yet to join it, the future generation. So what inspired you to start the Cyber Project?
Yeah, so I mean, what you described there is almost like ADHD in slow motion. It's wait, what, squirrel? Yeah, I mean, so I got into security thinking it was fun and exciting, and my first introduction to security was in really ComSec, communication security, the spying aspect. I mean, so to make a living while I was while the security industry in Ireland was growing, was in its infancy. I couldn't make a full-time living. I was installing wiretaps, bugging offices, tapping telephones, and then as a consequence, sweeping offices. And all legitimately, it was by their employers, by the businesses wanting to know what was going on, who was being dishonest and stuff like that. So that really thrilled me. But as the industry got on, it became more cynical. It became more like IT with the security hat. And I was not an IT guy, and I wasn't comfortable around IT people. But it really took me until probably last year to realize that I was so cynical and burned out with this, I need to find something else. And my wife said, "What about mental health? It's perfect." I'd been confronting my own mental health issues. They had completely skewed my career. I thought I was an entrepreneur at heart, but I was dealing with, they used to call it social affective disorder, which is part of the anxiety disorder. Very uncomfortable around people. If you're uncomfortable around people, you don't network. If you don't network, you don't go to conferences, you don't meet people, you don't learn, you don't get out there. So I was really a lousy entrepreneur, which fed in the depression, which, like so many people in Ireland, we suffer from that significantly, and also ADHD. So I was all over the place. Every new idea I was pursuing. I mean, early 90s, I was working on voice-based verification for the British banking system, for the phone banking. Within a year, I got bored. If I'd stuck with that, biometrics is now, I think, a thing.
It is.
So I was dealing with all these issues that had really got me in trouble with my career. And she finally said, "Well, listen, why don't you do something that makes you happy? What makes you happy?" And I said, "Well, apart from sailing around the world, which won't make me any money, let's talk about mental illness." And like a lot of people in security, I'm very cause motivated. And I thought, this is a good cause. So a good bridge from the old life to the new life was to go from security to mental health insecurity. And when I started talking about mental health, and I was talking about PTSD and bipolar and depression, all the people that I know in security dealing with that, most of the hands waving were saying, no, the bigger issue is stress and burnout. So that's how the SecureWorld Project came out. I said, well, who's doing it? What data do we have? Is it as prevalent as people are saying anecdotally? And that's where the idea of, first of all, the survey, and then turning a survey into a viable security strategy for security leaders.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. That leads to the next question: is how can the security professionals who are listening to the podcast right now, or the leaders, depending, somebody from the team, right? How can they get involved in this effort? What are you asking of them?
The simplest thing we're asking right now is for them to complete the survey. The more data, the more voices, the more screaming, the more ammunition that we have to actually do what most people are screaming about loud is some kind of action, some movement to take this more seriously. So to take the survey, you'll find our site at thecyberproject.com, PSYBER project.com. There's a link to the survey all over that website. Start there. Take the survey. It's 20 questions. It takes about 5 to 6 minutes. It's completely anonymous. You can include your email address if you want us to follow up with it. There's a screaming room at the end where you can vent and complain, suggest, share, whatever you feel like doing. As I say, completely anonymous and private. If you're a CISO, talk to us. Find out what we're learning. Be part of this infection. We'd love to go and talk to your security team personally and see what they specifically have to say about your environment. This is a generic study, but we'd like to see, well, who are the toxic rock stars in your security team, and how can we address that? What are the specific issues your security team would like to see fixed to make them better, which will make you look better? So start with the survey, and then get engaged in the discussion. And more voices, like anything in mental health, more voices address stigma. Stigma makes it much easier for everyone to I know it sounds cheesy, but look for a cure.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, for sure. And what do you hope to do with all of this data? So you're going to be finding out, and the burnout and stress factors will be revealed. I think, as you said, you're already on to some things. What are you envisioning long term for the Cyber Resilience Project? If you said, this is where I would like to see it go?
I would like to see every employer build mental health into their obviously their entire workforce. I mean, I'm always saying you're investing in people, but you're really investing in the 3 pounds above the shoulders. The brain is the most important part of the person that you're hiring. But I would like to see cyber resilience be a respected and embraced part of a security strategy. Support the mental wellness of your security team, and everybody wins. And you win in so many different ways. So I'd like it to be a regular, comfortable part of the security conversation, and not just a fringe, loony, theoretical approach to security. And I'd like the security community, the individual practitioners, to become comfortable enough to raise their hands and say, yep, that's me. I've suffered, I am suffering, I'm willing to talk about it if you're willing to do something about it. So I would love to see this become part of a normal security discussion. I'd like to see those get involved, embrace the ideas, learn about them. Most of them have no idea how stress actually biologically and chemically and physically works on the body. It's crushing. And it's very easy to solve. So I'd love to see that conversation in boardrooms.
Absolutely. And, honestly, when you were mentioning some of the signs of burnout, I had actually wondered, what does burnout look like? So you already educated me, and hopefully our audience today, for some of these things that we can watch for, which could drive us to take the survey. And so I will put a link in the show notes to your website, so you can check out more about Neal, about the Cyber Resilience Project. And Neal, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate all your work in this space.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being one of the first to actually step up and shine a light on this. That's what leadership is about. I really appreciate you inviting me here, Bruce.
Oh, yeah. Well, happy to do it. As soon as I saw it, I thought, this is an idea that we need to expose. So go to our show notes and head to the Cyber Resilience Project website, take that survey, and let's develop that baseline on mental health in cybersecurity and privacy. So thank you, Neal.
Thanks, Bruce.
Remember that match strike? Now the question is, will you help turn this movement into a roaring fire that protects future generations of security professionals? This is just the start, by the way, of a mental health mini-series that we're doing about cybersecurity. And next Tuesday, I'll be interviewing a CISO in the U.S. federal government who has a very personal story about how burnout impacted her life. And I'm guessing you'll be surprised by what she decided to do about it. Also in the show notes, a link to our brand new daily cybersecurity briefings called the Remote Sessions. Our team started these in response to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, when it put all the face-to-face collaboration on hold. And I've lost track of the exact timing, but I think this might be our 6th or 7th week of the briefings. That is what we call a brand new effort here at SecureWorld because SecureWorld's nearly 20 years old. Now, I host the remote sessions most days, and it would be great to connect with you there as well. So check it out. Also, remember our news team is always posting new security and privacy stories on our website. Find those at secureworldexpo.com. Well, thanks again to Trend Micro for sponsoring today's podcast. Thanks to our editor, Pete, because this show would not really happen without him. Or actually it would, but it'd be a lot more boring with no sound effects. So we're thankful for him. And on behalf of the entire SecureWorld team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the SecureWorld Sessions, and let's catch up again on Tuesday.